Hey guys, my name is Matimio, and welcome to another episode of Sunday Mailbox. This is a video series where you, the viewer, can submit your gaming or Battlefield-related questions, and then I will give my humble opinion on them. To get the formalities out of the way real quick, if you would like to submit your own question that could be featured in a future episode, you can do so by leaving a comment down below, or by sending me a YouTube message. So the first question for today is, I'm not sure if you've noticed that in the most recent Battlefield 4 footage, that the beaches of Paracel Storm are littered with now useless beach boats. What if DICE implemented a function like in Far Cry 3 where you could push the boat back into the water? So this has kind of been a problem with the Battlefield franchise for as long as I can remember. Like even back in Battlefield 2, Bad Company series, it's always been an issue where if you ride the boat all the way up onto the beach where it beaches itself, you have to either destroy it, use it as a stationary turret, or just let it sit there for the entire match because it becomes completely useless. Like you have no way of pushing it back into the water. And so for Battlefield 4, I'm kind of hoping that DICE tries to address this. And there are a couple ways that they could do it. Some people want it to be where you maybe go through an animation to kind of push it back in there, where it's like the knife where you'd maybe click a button and then your soldier just kind of pushes it back on in. I'm not really sure how that would work because the animation would be different depending on the angle that the boat is on the beach, and that could get a little funny. But really kind of the easiest solution that I can think of, I've never played Far Cry 3, so I don't know how that functions, and it may be very similar to this, where maybe you hold down a button and then you can slowly push the boat across the beach back into the water. The reason why I emphasize slowly is because you don't want people pushing this up onto the land like further in and then using it as a stationary turret. Like I don't think that's what DICE is intending it to be, because the boats are basically going to be a lot more powerful. If you haven't been paying attention, they are basically tanks in the water. Like they are going to have a lot of arsenal at their disposal. And so on maps like Paracel Storm, it could get a little weird if you could push these boats like all the way up onto the beach, onto like an objective or something like that, and then use it as a stationary turret that has a lot of firepower. So you want to avoid situations like that. But I think as long as they allow you to slowly push it, so you leave yourself at least a little bit vulnerable when you are going through it, that you can push it back into the water so that you can finally use it again. That just seems like a very simple solution, and I'm kind of hoping that's what DICE does. The next question comes from Roll of Blows, who asks, we already know that the Designated Marksman Rifle in Battlefield 4 are going to be universal, meaning that all classes can equip them. In Battlefield 3, it was only for the Recon class, and there was a load of hate for the semi-auto snipers. Do you think that this will be a balancing issue? Is this a problem on console? Because at least on PC, or maybe I'm just completely oblivious, but I don't find these semi-automatic rifles to be overpowered in the slightest. I mean, sure, they're great weapons, like the SKS and the M417 are solid weapons, but they're also balanced, at least in my eyes. I mean, you're trading off high damage and long-range killing potential for a slower rate of fire, and while you can still do really well up close, you're going to be at a disadvantage if you go against someone who is using a high rate of fire, or even if someone who is using the quote-unquote overpowered M16A3 or the M416. And so for Battlefield 4, I don't really think that this is going to be all that large of an issue. Sure, if DICE goes in and blatantly just makes them overpowered, then yeah, that needs to be addressed. But I don't see them doing that, and I kind of have a feeling it's going to be a lot like the personal defense weapons are in Battlefield 3. While they complement certain classes and certain setups very well, it's not like everyone is running around with a PDW or a PP19. They're running with the standard weapons for their kit. And if they do want to kind of mix things up, or they're not satisfied running around with the high-powered bolt-action rifles and they want to play a recon a little bit more aggressively, then they have those options. And so for Battlefield 4, it's just going to be the flip side, where if you want to play as the assault or you want to play as an engineer but have a little bit more long-range killing potential, you'll also have that in your arsenal. So I don't think it's going to be all that large of a problem. I have confidence in DICE's balancing capability. They did a really great job in Battlefield 3, and I don't think it's going to be an issue. The next question comes from Sheer, who asks, what do you think about having a third-person game mode in Battlefield 4? I remember back in the day when Call of Duty was actually a good game, they had a game mode where you played in the third person. Not many people played it, but I loved it. Surprisingly, I get this question all the time. I'm not really sure why. I didn't even know that this game mode was all that appealing, even back in Call of Duty. And you even say it in your question that it wasn't popular back then, but you really enjoyed it. And so while I'm happy that you enjoyed that experience, I don't really see them implementing that into Battlefield 4. As you said, it wasn't popular, and DICE wants to create a gameplay experience that is going to be popular. And if they do try to implement a new game mode in there, they want it to hit a very large demographic. Like, they want it to be a selling point. They want people to be like, hey, I want to try that out. I want to pick up Battlefield just to play that certain game mode. And I don't think that a third-person mode is really going to entice people to do that. Not only that, but Battlefield is also based around first-person mechanics, and a third-person mode kind of needs a really solid cover system. Like, if you play like Mass Effect, if it didn't have a solid cover system, it wouldn't be enjoyable. And if it was just kind of like you running around and placing your guy next to a wall or something like that, and you were just facing the wall constantly and then just kind of strafing back and forth, it probably wouldn't be a very enjoyable experience. And that would be kind of like what you would get if Battlefield 4 had a third-person mode. They do have kind of like a pseudo cover system now, where if you crouch behind cover or something like that and you aim down sight, your soldier will peek up above the cover, and then you can kind of have a great line of sight over everyone. But I don't think that would be strong enough to support this kind of game mode. So I wouldn't get your hopes up. The next question comes from CG Pentelli, who asks, I was wondering how you think the tiered perk system will work once you change classes. For example, you've ranked up to 2 levels on the Assault Grenadier perk tree and then change the Engineer to deal with a vehicle and use a different perk tree. What happens to the points that you've gained to level up the perks? Do you start from scratch? Does it roll over onto the next perk tree? And if it does roll over, could this be abused by changing mid-late game if the trees aren't balanced perfectly? So the system that it sounds like you're describing here is the field upgrades. And from what we've heard from DICE is that if you completely max out the tiers, you've got everything unlocked, you're working with your squad, you're doing everything right, you're trying to play as a team, even if you switch between classes, you'll still be on the 4th tier. Or if you're on the 3rd tier, you'll be on the 3rd tier if you switch between Assault and Engineer. And the reason why they're doing this is that because they don't want you to feel like you're being punished for helping your team. Like, if the enemy team is destroying you with vehicles and you're playing as an Assault, they don't want you to feel like you're being punished for switching on over to a class that can dispose of enemy vehicles. They want you to be proactive in making those decisions. Like, that's one of the great things about the Battlefield franchise, and that's one of the things about being a team player. And so they don't want to punish you for doing those types of actions. And from what we've seen so far, I don't think that people are going to be able to really abuse this system. Like, if you get to the max tier in the field upgrade path for the Grenadier, you're going to have a lot of grenades at your disposal, but you're going to be weaker in other areas. But then if you switch on over to the Engineer, and it's not like all of a sudden you're going to be overpowered and you're just going to dominate everyone. No, you're going to have different strengths and weaknesses for those field upgrade paths, and you're just going to have to play it a little bit differently. So as long as DICE balances things appropriately, which it looks like they are, I don't think that this is going to be an issue. And I honestly like the way that they're heading with field upgrades. But that is about it for today's Sunday Mailbox, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Once again, if you would like to submit your own question that can be featured in a future episode, you can do so by leaving a comment down below or by sending me a YouTube message. But until tomorrow, guys, have a good one and take it easy.